Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to the CDOTrends Digi-Live Summit. I'm Lachlan Colquhoun. I'm the Australia and New Zealand editor for CDOTrends and also for Next Gen Connectivity. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. We hope the time you spend with us is well rewarded. The theme of our event today is the pursuit of digital success. And like the pursuit of happiness in everyday life, it can sometimes be elusive. I'm sure many of you are finding that right now. Today, we'll be looking at some of the key challenges that organisations have been dealing with as they continue their digital journeys. Because there's no doubt the digitalisation has accelerated over the last year. The impact of the pandemic has been well documented. But while some of the digitalisation has been necessary for survival and adaptation, creating lasting value has remained a challenge. One of the main areas organisations have looked to drive their transformations has been in the area of data. This has often really been good in theory, and yet there are disparities on the quality and accessibility of this data, and many are finding that hurdles persist as they look to drive data-centric decision-making. We have two sessions in our 2-hour event today, and we'll be hearing from some of Australia's digital leaders on the challenges they've been facing and how they are dealing with them. Between the two sessions, we'll be able to relax and be entertained with some music from a duo who have proved very popular at our previous CDOTrends events. We do welcome input from participants. We find that helps keep the sessions interactive and lively. And if you have questions, we'd love you to put them into the Q&A function on the bottom right of the screen. They'll come through to the moderators and we'll put them to the panel at the appropriate time. And so to the first panel, which I'll be moderating, and then my colleague Winston Thomas will be moderating the second panel. The theme of the first panel is the imperative of connected data in driving competitive advantages. Here we'll be talking about the challenges of disparate data sources, data quality and trust, and how dealing with these challenges can drive business opportunities and ultimately boost an organisation's financial performance. We have a great panel here from very interesting organisations who've been all dealing with things in a very different way. I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Sue-Lin. She is the Head of Technology Pacific and Singapore for real estate firm CBRE. We have Clare Kitching, the General Manager, Data Insights and Analytics for Treasury Wine Estates, and Dominic O'Halloran. He's the Head of Data and Analytics at fast-moving consumer brands company MECCA Brands. So I'd like to begin by asking each of you to begin by outlining the particular data challenge which your organisation is facing. We had preliminary chats before the event, and it's clear that each of you is dealing with an organisation at different levels of data maturity and with different challenges going forward. And data means different things to each of the organisation. Sue, from a CBRE, can I begin with you? Could you outline the data challenges that your organisation is facing as you currently see them?
Yeah, sure, Lachlan. Great to be here. I guess the data challenges that we're facing, I think of them in kind of three ways. We have generally a low digital maturity in the organisation. It's quite similar across the commercial real estate industry, to be honest. You know, it's a low digital maturity across the industry. So we're kind of playing catch up to all of the fintechs and health industries in adopting technology. So, you know, there's lots of opportunities and greenfields, but also it's a bit of a hard slog from a cultural perspective, trying to get people and processes in play so that they can work alongside digital. And then alongside with that is kind of the culture piece. You know, it's a commercial real estate firm. The way that brokers and agents make money is through who you know, very relational business. And so they're very protective of their patch and of their little black book and all the data that comes along with that. To trying to share that data from a cultural sense is difficult because what we're trying to get to is kind of an enterprise view of data, but for them that has no direct tangible benefit at this point in time. Yeah, so I guess those are the kind of issues that I'm grappling with.
So I guess the word silo would be a big one for you. There must be a lot of different silos, both sort of functionally and operationally within your business, different teams, but also on a geographical basis. Can you talk to me about some of the silos that you're having to deal with as you try and get your data together?
Yeah, where do I start? We're a global organization, so there's one silo in itself. So, you know, each of the countries is a silo within itself. And then within each of the countries, you know, we have lines of businesses that all kind of operate very independently. So, you know, we do everything for a building other than build it. So we manage it, we rent it, we lease it. And so all of these different lines of businesses all operate very much like their own business. And part of the digital and the data shift is really trying to get people to collaborate more and trying to see the value in that collaboration, because clients expect it, to be honest. You know, it's no longer acceptable that, we have a large multinational organization that interacts with CBRE in the US and interacts with CBRE in Auckland, and that we don't know anything about it. We have to know everything about it. But trying to get the data systems working together and the people talking together, that's the other challenge there.
So where does your data lie then? It must lie in a lot of different places, in a lot of different systems, not only in different silos, but there must be a whole lot of legacy systems that are built up around various operational aspects of your business where you have to get the data out and aggregate it, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those legacy systems are people's heads, Excel spreadsheets. Yeah. We do have a few legacy systems in there as well, but mostly it's around how singular teams operate, and a lot of that is through operations that have just grown organically, from the ground up, and a lot of it is run through Excel spreadsheets. And so we've gone through a big process of trying to implement Salesforce. We've developed a property database as well to try and get all of this data from all its bits and pieces all over the place into an actual system, because once it's systemic, we can actually do something with it. But yes, it's getting there, but it's slow.
Thank you. Clare Kitching from Treasury Wine Estates, if I can come to you. When we had our preliminary chat before the sessions, I was interested to hear that you've only been really in the role for a short period of time, only about 3 months, I think you said. Can you talk, that must have been an interesting learning curve. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just the state of data and how it functions currently in your organisation?
Yeah, so I have been at Treasury Wine Estates for the last 3 months, but prior to that, have had about 15 years in data and analytics, and was probably previously at Wesfarmers, which is a retail conglomerate in Australia and has a much higher data maturity. So coming to Treasury, I think, so people who don't know Treasury Wine Estates, we're a globally vertically integrated business. We have everything from grape to glass, and that means we have a lot of data sources. So I think the great thing is Treasury realised, hey, we actually need to do something about this, and we need a bit more experience to bring it to life. And so my role was created. And one of our big challenges is really about integrating and aggregating data sources. And actually, a lot of the things that Sue said before resonate. We have a cottage industry of Excel spreadsheets. There's lots of legacy systems. And do you know what? All the business rules are in people's heads. But it's been quite interesting to work with people, even in the last 3 months, and say, look, we are trying to bring some of this data together. We've got some of that. We know you've got those business rules in your head. Let's try and get that into a formalized system. Let's understand where all these Excel spreadsheets are, and let's try and work to how do we find better systems to get that data and also manage that data. So I think the good thing about Treasury is, on one hand, the business uses a lot of data. It's just everywhere. And with that, we're hampered by the effort that it takes an individual to bring all the parts of data that they need for their job together. And we're also hampered a little bit by data quality, in that someone's going to use data from one source, another does a lovely little business rule in their Excel spreadsheet. And one of the things we want to do is create a better single source of truth. And we're slowly doing that, which is good. I think the other part is that we are really trying to fix some basics here, and then building on that and helping our team members develop their capabilities so that they're excited again to use data and can do so much more with it. And then I think this other area that we're looking at is around data governance. It doesn't sound that exciting. And I must admit, every time I have a meeting on this, I'm a bit like, oh, this isn't something people want to really listen to. But it is quite an interesting thing to slowly start to consolidate some of these sources and realise that you can fix the data quality issues at source, and bit by bit, in 6 months' time, we will have fixed quite a lot. So it's exciting in that way.
But it must be a case that you have so much incoming and outgoing as well. I mean, you must be dealing with production, supply chain data in addition to sales data as well.
Yes, we start at one place at a time. So our business has a few different divisions, and we have sort of said, actually, how do we start working with our supply and identifying where is the area of biggest value that we want to start looking at? What are their priority data sets? Actually, what do they want to use that data for? So how do we get some of those business rules in with the data so it's usable by the rest of the business? And then we're moving on to the different parts of our sort of more commercial arms. We've got some in America. We've got our Penfolds brand, and we have our Treasury premium brands as well. So also working with each of those to say, what is the data that they need? So it's not all, I think, we are trying to make sure that we look in one area and go a little bit deep so that one area can be a bit more self-sufficient before we move on to the next. We can't fix everything all at once.
That's interesting. So the fact that you're new to the role and it's a newly created role, does that mean that the organisation really didn't have a terribly high sense of data maturity before you arrived?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment, and I think it takes a little bit of time for companies to understand what they need. And I suppose in my career, I've worked across a lot of industries, and telcos and banking, they generate data as people sort of just transact, and so it's a bit cleaner and it's a bit easier. You look at then retail has caught up to that as well. Hey, how do we get that online and offline data? And I worked at Wesfarmers for a couple of years, and you really see that that maturity has gone up as well. I think on the consumer goods side, this is where there is lower maturity in terms of both digital and data and analytics. And it's because on one hand, you don't always have direct access to the consumer, but also you're working across many different parts of the business as well. So, the supply chain has their different systems. Actually, as you build a product, what sort of data do you get there, and how are you testing? And then as it goes into the market, it is sometimes harder to get that data around how successful that product is. So I think a lot of the consumer goods companies you see now are really upping their game on data and analytics, and it's great that Treasury is doing that now as well.
Thank you. And Dominic, I understand from our previous discussion that you were also new in the role. I understand you're a previous colleague of Clare as well.
Yes.
So some of the challenges that she's outlined, does that resonate with you, or are there differences in the challenge that you're facing? Perhaps we can hear a bit of a high-level picture of where you're at MECCA.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lachlan. So like Clare, I've been in this role for just over 3 months now. And so for those of you that may not be familiar with MECCA, we're a luxury cosmetics and skincare and makeup retailer. We've got stores across Australia and New Zealand, and dipping our foot into the China market as well at the moment. So we have, our focus is primarily on bringing those sort of light luxury brands to the consumers here in Australia and New Zealand. Kind of like Clare, I'm also in a newly created role. So prior to me joining, MECCA did not have a head of analytics. So this is, I think, similar to what Clare was saying. This is sort of an acknowledgement that MECCA is at a point where we have the scale and we have the ambition that we really need solid data foundations, and we need to be able to the analytics needs to scale and grow with the business as we have such great aspirations for the future. So, and I would kind of characterize the challenges that I'm facing here slightly differently. One is the first challenge for me is actually about building a team and building up that analytics team. We had a relatively small number of people working in analytics in the business, but now we need to really change the profile of what the team looks like so that we are not just sort of servicing the need of analytics, but we're creating demand and we're pushing the business and what they can do with analytics. And then I think because we've had a relatively small analytics team in the past, we have a great number of analysts across the business who have been, really like running with Tableau and our self-service platform. But we've now got to that point where, and it comes back to scale, we can't meet the demand that we have for analytics in the business. So we're looking at how do we build that new data platform of the future that is scalable and is going to be able to see us through for the next, say 5 to 7 years is the goal there. And then,
it sounds very much as if the data strategy is aligned with the business growth strategy. It sounds different to Treasury and CBRE, where the data strategy is coming on top of a very well established organisation. It sounds from what you said that data is part of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think there's certainly an acknowledgement that as to be able to continue the growth for MECCA, we really need that solid underpinning of data analytics and that data fluency across the business. So this is, the start of being able to really empower the teams that need data, that need analytics, so that we can really achieve and support those growth targets, I guess.
Thank you. Now we've talked about the challenge. It's now time to talk about what we're doing about meeting those challenges. But before we do that, Sue-Lin, just a quick question I should have asked you before is that on a previous event that we had, there was a colleague of yours from CBRE from Australia, and she was talking very significantly about the changes that the pandemic and COVID had on business and work within your organisation. Has that also had an impact on the way you approach data?
I don't know that it's had an impact on the way that we've approached data, but certainly it has escalated or accelerated rather digital adoption, because we've had to work remotely, and now that's acceptable to, have meetings via Zoom. When that all first hit, I do remember, the great outcry it was. That was like, oh yes, we could have this meeting with the client in New York in Zoom. We don't have to fly over there, or the client doesn't have to fly back here. So I think just generally it has made the business grow up a lot quicker because they've had to accept digital tools as part of their everyday job, which they didn't have to previously. So from that point of view, I think it has provided a bit of an acceleration in terms of system adoption and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so tell me about the projects and the plans that you've got in place to meet the challenge of data within the CBRE.
Yeah, interesting. So we have it in a kind of a two-speed mode, I guess. We have a local Pacific data strategy, and we kind of took a step back and engaged with an external party to help us with our data strategy, to really look at it from a holistic sense. Do a current state assessment, figure out where we were and what our level of maturity was. Unsurprisingly, it was not very high. It was ad hoc and non-repeatable at best. And so, they recognized all of the things which all good consultants do. They tell you, they shine a mirror onto your organization and tell you what you already know about the state of your organization. So we've started there. We're now 6 months into the engagement, almost complete, and we're kind of recommending now a proposal on where we go forward with that from a resourcing and timeline strategy, operational point of view. So we're looking at setting up those, as Claire mentioned, those very exciting data governance meetings, working groups, data stewards, the whole cat and caboodle. But really, I think what we're trying to temper that with is a bit of pragmatism, in that we really want it to be focused around business outcomes. So we're highlighting a couple of use cases there that we want to see from start to finish, and through that process, create the kind of steer codes and governance to assist with that use case, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the local version of it. And then globally, I think we have a global CDO as well, and they are looking at it from an enterprise point of view and how they provide data mine as a service and data governance as a service across the organization, because at an enterprise level, like a CBRE global level, we also want to be able to talk to each other, have some kind of interoperability between the data that we have, so that we can harness that richness in there. So it is a bit of a hub and spoke model, in that the centralized data team will provide guidance, frameworks, recommendations on tools and so on, and then the local markets have an opportunity to kind of implement that as well.
Thank you. And at this point, yes, I'd certainly like to welcome questions from participants. Just go to the Q&A function in the bottom right of your screen and put your questions there, and I'll check them there, and I can put them to the participants and the panelists accordingly. Claire, you talked about a lot of different small projects that you've got happening. Can you sort of tell me what you're up to in your planning?
Oh, I wouldn't say we're all lots of little small ones. We probably have one big one, but also try and encourage a lot of involvement from the company. So we're probably in the first year really facing into maturing our data. And we have 3 pillars that we're looking at. One is on developing our platform and making sure that we have the priority data sets available, structured well on that platform, and are used by divisions for their business needs. And so we're working division by division to say, actually, how do we work with you to say, where is that value? What do we want to achieve initially? And then let's work together on that. So that's our first one's probably about platform, data, and analytics. The second one is really initializing our data governance approach. And this is working with divisions to identify what data do we have, what are the data quality issues, who are going to be our data owners and data stewards, and also implementing a data governance tool as well. And then the third part is around uplifting our data literacy. And this is really about letting people know the power of data, starting to identify who has the skills, but who should have the skills, and how do we uplift those, and then developing some communities of practice to give people the support and the access to training that they might need. And so as Sue mentioned, we also have a hub and spoke model. I'm at the hub, but also we are setting up the spokes. And so I think in that, it's also working with the spokes to say, hey, let's think about what is the strategy, the data and analytics strategy that's right for you, and how do we work together on this? And what are the skills you need? How are we going to grow both in the near term, but what are we going to do in the next 6 months, but longer term, where are the opportunities, and how do we link that to your strategy, to your tech roadmap, and everything that you want to do. So it's given that we have so many parts of the business, it is very interesting to get into the detail of where data and analytics can help.
And if I was to be a fly on the wall at one of your governance meetings, what sort of things would I hear discussed?
There's a few things. One, what are the definitions that we have for data, and actually how are we going to get that together? There's also lots of discussion on, do we agree on the definitions together? If you think about it, business rules in people's heads, there's business definitions in people's heads as well. And then actually, how are we both tactically and long-term thinking about fixing data quality issues at source? So what do we do in the near term to make sure that files don't change every month, and we can keep on having that automatically updated? And then longer term, how do we find those providers that can aggregate already for us and will provide a better quality of data?
Thank you. Dominic, to you then. Can you tell us what you've got going on there at MECCA in terms of the projects that you're overseeing?
Yeah, sure. So I think we do have a lot of BAU work that we need to keep going. Unfortunately, we can't just stop that and move to, straight into that exciting new world with a new platform and start there. So part of what I'm doing is, looking at the way that we are doing BAU and we are working with the rest of the business at the moment, and then bringing in a much more squad-based structure so that where analytics now is partnering with the business and defining out what is the roadmap for analytics and supply chain. And we're really starting to, rather than just have a big pool of analytics requests coming into a central place, where we're actually putting dedicated resource and people into specific areas of the business. So I think that's one of the first things that we're doing, just to try and get through more of that BAU and change the way that analytics operates within MECCA. The next project that we've got going is about defining and working out what our end-state architecture is for the data platform. And the aim here is that once we land and agree that, this is going to be the new data warehouse, and this is how we're going to be doing ETL, and this is the rest of the technology that we need, we can start to do proof of concepts on, say, let's move this reporting workload onto the new data platform and see how that benefits our end users. And kind of tied to this data platform, I guess strategy is understanding and getting a real sense of how people are using Tableau across the business. We've got a really high engagement, but there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of challenges. So it's we're starting to define what are those different personas across the business that use analytics, and then how do we what are those really initial big gaps in terms of our reporting data layer that we need to fill to let people have access to the data that they need more immediately while we're working on that data platform project.
And so tell me about the business case for your data project. How do you ultimately see that all this work that you're doing is going to have a positive impact on the organization's performance and its and the financial result?
Yeah, I think the business case is relatively straightforward for us. I think it's really clear and apparent that the things that people want to be doing with data in the business it's unattainable for them at the moment. So if we want to be able to give our supply chain a view of daily stock, by store that they can have and manipulate and use easily, like that's out of our reach at the moment. So there's really clear enablement as part of the business case. And so it's really about building those foundations. And then the cherry on top is going to be when we can actually start to do more advanced analytics and move into bringing machine learning and AI into what analytics can offer the business.
Thank you. Claire, can I ask you the same question?
Yes. And we would probably be very similar to Dom, that it's almost a believer's business case for this initial piece of work. And it's about making our team members' work lives better. Giving them easier access to data, improved automation for data and reporting, and fixing the basics so that they feel comfortable doing their jobs. In 6 to 9 months' time, it is more of a growth business case. What are the selected analytics projects and machine learning projects that we should do on improving consumer engagement and also across our supply chain? I think if I step back and it's not part of our current business case, but increasingly in the consumer goods industry, I think there's also a burning platform that if we don't have this data connected across the business, then we're going to miss out tomorrow. And I think sustainability is a really, really good example here. We all have sustainability targets that we want to meet, but if we can't track this across our supply chain all the way back to the vineyards, then we're going to miss out in terms of customers stocking our products and consumers choosing our products. And so I think there is a lot that you're going to miss out on if we don't do this.
Yeah, and I guess in a company like yours, ultimately the transparency of the supply chain is something that you also need to demonstrate to investors and regulators. Is that right?
Yes, more and more so. And so I think that sort of data lineage and connecting things across the business is quite important for us and one that we're very much working towards.
Thank you. Now, Sue-Lin, you're a very different sort of organisation to both MECCA and Treasury One Estates. Tell us about the ultimate benefits that you hope to gain from the data projects that you're involved in. How is it going to transform and improve the performance of CBRE?
As I mentioned, that low digital maturity, and we've had a hard slog of implementing systems, CRM systems such as Salesforce, and getting people to use them in the right way. I mean, that's a cultural thing as much as it is a technology thing. But I think data quality has been an issue as well. If you can't trust the data, then they won't use the system. So I think it's also the data benefits is improving on the investment that we've already made in those systems. And getting the data quality within those systems better so we can improve that adoption. And then like Claire mentioned around the sustainability, that's obviously a massive thing in our industry. And so being able to connect the dots across all of that data and be able to provide sustainability targets, it's something our clients are demanding. If we're not able to provide that level of service, that level of data and insight, we're behind the competitors. So that's another kind of client-facing value that we hope to see for the data strategy business case. And then, just generally for their employee basis as well, providing that automation, improving operational efficiency, not having a multitude of Excel files that people are manipulating every day for presentations and so on. There's that level of, basic kind of hygiene almost across that operational efficiency layer.
Thank you. And we've already started to talk about the next thing I wanted to mention, which is data lineage and connecting data. Claire, it would sound from what you're saying that's would it be true to say that that's something that you will achieve down the track once you get these other pieces in place? Where are you now on that journey towards that?
We are very close to starting. So as part of our data governance tool, we're also putting in data lineage capability there. And so this is something we want to start from the beginning, and really as a link to quality of data and traceability in terms of what data is going into end decisions. And then I think from an audit point of view, for something like sustainability, can we track it all back as well? I think this is really different. That's sort of one reason why you need that lineage. If I look back at the time at Wesfarmers, you've actually got a really different sort of view of lineage. And this is something we also tracked very early on. But it was really, our aim at Wesfarmers was to provide a more relevant customer experience. And the lineage challenge was a lot more tied to the ethics and customer trust and being able to make sure that we're only using data in the way that our customers have asked us or allowed us to use that data. So I think data lineage, it is incredibly important, and I think sort of something to get onto from the get-go, because there are so many applications of it, and in different parts of the business as well.
Dom, how about data lineage for you? How important is it, and where are you in sort of achieving where you want to get to with it?
Yeah, look, it's absolutely important. And I think the way that I'm considering it here at MECCA is that we have the multiple sources of truth issue that everyone is facing. Because we have such, we have the analysts that work out in the business that are developing all their own reporting and doing their own analysis. That means that all of those teams can have multiple different versions of the truth as well. So the way that I see data lineage is that for the analytics team, it's about creating those common data sets that can be used across the business, but to do that, we then need to be able to have the transparency to say that this is where how these things were created, and this is what they mean, and this is where the data was or has come from, and then I think the other part of it for me is that currently, whenever we have issues within the data warehouse, the tracking down what's connected to what breaks and impacts the next thing, that's actually a really big manual time suck at the moment for our team. So what I'm looking at in terms of data lineage is how can we actually bring some of that into our tooling to reduce the effort, like the manual effort that our team has to go through just to fix all the issues that inevitably happen within data pipelines and in getting data into the warehouse.
How about third-party data? Dom, I'll start with you, ask you this one. Is it something that's just simply too hard at the moment? Or I imagine that in your business, you're talking about working in China. I imagine that consumer data about the Chinese market would be incredibly valuable to you as you plan and forecast your business. To what extent are you bringing that third-party data in, or is it all just too hard at the moment?
Yeah, and I think it's done in various different degrees. So I think within like the analytics team and within our like enterprise kind of data, we don't have that third party in there at the moment. But I think out within the rest of the business, there are lots of trend reports and customer insights pieces and market performance and market share type of work that's happening. I think there's definitely a need and a case to bring that together so that we do have a common view across the business of what of what people are looking at, and then how can we bring that integrate that into the rest of our reporting, and then I think it also comes back to that source of truth as well, because you can have multiple third-party data providers that each have a different methodology of calculating things, and you do also run into that single source of truth issue. And it was something that Clare and I also saw at Wesfarmers when we're creating customer attributes and customer data is from your own first-party data. As soon as you look at the third-party view, you're going to find differences, and then it becomes about is that right? Is that okay? And how do you reconcile kind of the first party data view that may be different to the third party?
Is there also a trust issue with the third party data that you need to resolve before you actually bring it into your environment and use it as part of your process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes back to then also like consent, privacy, and ethics, and
Yep.
what is the, how do you want to be sourcing data, and how are you using, if you've got customer data of your own, do you have permission to enrich it, and are you giving your customers visibility of that? I think that's really important, especially as we are, there is that need to become more privacy aware and privacy compliant.
Okay, Sue-Lin, the third-party data issue, is that something that that you deal with as well?
It's something we would like to have, and I think it could be of value. We're certainly not there yet. I think our data lake within the organisation is large enough to encounter with. But thinking about it when I'm listening to Dom and Claire talk about it, it's around bringing in data that is part of our ecosystem. So, for example, lead conversion from external listing sites, as an example. How do we bring that sort of data and then track that through our own Salesforce systems and deal lifecycle, and that can be a measure of kind of campaign effectiveness or external party effectiveness. So at some point, I think we will definitely look to interact with third-party data. And then from a privacy point of view, I think also because we manage data on behalf of clients a lot, we in fact become the third party in a way. So there's a lot of kind of privacy and compliance rules, because in providing services to clients, like from a property management or evaluations point of view, it's very sensitive client data, and which we have a contractual obligation to protect.
Thank you. Claire, can I ask you the same question on third party?
Well, given we're consumer goods companies, we actually don't have a lot of first-party data on consumers. so we do get a lot of external data. And we are slowly working out what is the most useful and where to sort of spend the effort there. I think from the time at Wesfarmers, you can spend a lot of time looking at third-party data. And I think there is a real trade-off between being able to get value from it and being really specific about what the value is, even though there's some really cool data science things that you can do. And I think things like, the map data, the location and demographics data, I think you've got to be quite targeted as to what use case you're going to put there, because it does sound like, oh, I can do a lot of things with this. But when you really think, actually, are you going to use this for personalization? Are you going to actually use it for how your store network's laid out? There's different ways that can help. So I would sort of caution people on, there is a lot of advantage to come from third-party data, but being really clear about what you want to use that for.
Thank you. I'd like to go to a question from the audience, from somebody who they start off by complimenting Dominic's beard, and then go on to ask a question which I'll put to the three of you, and whoever wants to answer it can put their hand up. How do you entertain users impacted by the changes of robotic implementation in the environment? Any of you want to go on that one?
Okay, I'll have a go, and then maybe that will take me off the other question, which I don't want to answer. I think people always think of that, as kind of like the industrialization, right? The factories and so on, but it's only opportunity, really. We have a transformation, who doesn't, program of work going on at the moment, looking to really release capacity for people that are bogged down with manual tasks. And part of that is, data entry and data munging. But it releases that capacity so they can do higher grade stuff, higher level things that they want to do but can't, because 50 or 60% of their job is actually just getting the data there to a level where they can actually do something with. So I don't think it's a fear factor. It's an opportunity perspective for sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that when I started at Wesfarmers, we did was work out with our divisions and build out some advanced analytics use cases. So one of the things we were doing was working with the merchandise planners and helping them to forecast the demand so that they can make more accurate buys for the products that they need to bring in. And I think part of there was absolutely a sensitivity that we had to have about how is this going to be integrated into your work and what is it going to do. But I think it really came down to what we can do is help automate some parts of it and then free your time up so that you can actually think about the more strategic questions. And what we found was that there's much more benefit for, say, that the merchandise planners from being able to look more, say, strategically across the whole portfolio of products that they're buying, rather than trying to spend time on just one or two things at the time. If we can release them from the the need to do that part across everything, they can then become more strategic in the way that they approach demand forecasting, essentially.
And I guess all that speaks to the idea of culture. I mean, we've been talking about data, and I know Sue, when we had our preliminary discussion, you were talking about the challenges of culture within your organisation, where people are very much they keep things to themselves. Clients are kept close. People are very competitive with each other, I would imagine, in a real estate company. How much of a barrier have you found a culture to the data projects that you're trying to implement?
Pretty big. If you think about the nature of the business and the way that they are remunerated, it's through a commission basis, right? So if your livelihood depends on owning your own data and not sharing that data with anyone else, of course you're going to be really protective of it. So it's been a big cultural shift to trying to get people to collaborate and to actually and almost think about the remuneration structure such that actually we win. I think the term is we win more when we win together, I think is the nifty way of trying to think about it. But, it's about that fee split, right? So, I might get an X fee split for selling a large office building. But if I pull in other parts of the business, we might get an extra deal to manage the property or value the property, or, we could do a workplace strategy project with this. So you bring in more parts of the business together and the pool becomes larger, the fee becomes larger. So it's around that collaboration piece and trying to get them to think about the organisation rather than the individual. So that's a big piece, and it is a big data barrier. We're slowly getting around it, but it's tricky.
But would it be fair to say that the data projects that you're implementing, that they can have a transformational impact on culture as well? Do you think they can change that sort of culture that you've outlined to an extent, if you get it right?
Hopefully, if we can sort of show value. I mean, that's all it is, right? Showing value in putting that data and the outputs that they get out of it, the insights that they get out of it. If that leads them to win more business, then it's a massive tick. And so, yes, if we're able to show that value, certainly it can be a tipping point towards relying on that more. Yeah.
You're a very different organisation at Treasury Wine Estates. Does any of that resonate with you? Is there sort of competition between groups, between brands, for example, that makes culture an issue in what you're trying to achieve?
Do you know what? We haven't experienced that yet, and I think there is a little bit more transparency on some of the data about how brands are going. And though we do have different divisions, there's not necessarily an outright competition against them. And we're not divisionally autonomous. So it is sort of actually how are we working for Treasury as a whole. I think culturally we have a different sort of challenge, and this is a wariness of big dreams and high expectations and not necessarily delivering, in history around that, because lots of people have told me, I think we've tried this before, Claire. What's going to make it different? So there's lots coming on there, and I think it is saying, well, you know what? This isn't just about data. This is actually about how we work and making sure that you know how to work with data. And I think on the other hand, resetting some expectations. Some of my colleagues joke with me that all I've done since I've come is stop projects, slow them down and lower expectations. But it is sort of really just trying to be realistic around what a data project will provide in near term. I think the great thing is we have some good support from the execs. And now we're starting to bank some wins and get some more uptake from people on the ground. And I would say even in the last 3 months have gone from I'm not seeing anything to today being on a call and being like, oh yeah, I really see a lot of progress here, a lot of more coming in, and how this is going to add value to what we're doing in our processes. So I think it's banking some wins. The other part is knowing that data and data projects are about relationships. You need to work out what problems people have, individuals have, not just the organisation, and show people how you can help them with data to deliver them. And I think one of the sort of parts for a lot of my team coming in, I was like, stop talking to the execs, guys. It's your peers. It's the people on the ground that you need to get on board and help them, because then it will they'll have the groundswell and help the rest of the organisation grow.
That's a great segue into the idea of democratisation. I know my colleague Winston will be moderating a panel on that a little bit later, but while I've got each of you here, the three of you here, I think it'd be just to comment on where you stand on the idea of data and democracy and distributing through the organisation, because it is also a cultural piece. Dominic, where do you stand on this issue? Are you trying to make data as democratic as possible, because you think that the more people who have it, the better off you'll be?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think what I'm trying to build here at MECCA is to really like enable that self-service, and I want to bring the platform and the data, and then I want to get out of the way. I don't want to have a centralized analytics team. I don't want to be that bottleneck to get analytics done. So look, I'm all for democratizing the data, and I think we've done a relatively good job of that at MECCA so far. We do have a lot of power users out in the business, but I think that the challenge that we have is they're in some areas, they're not widespread across the business. So we don't have, while we may have, more democracy of data within, say, like supply chain, we certainly don't have that in marketing. So it's about not just doing it for one team, but it's, how do you get that sort of like enterprise level playing field? And then once you do democratize it, then you've also got to make sure that you can keep up with the demand and you can keep pace with what they need, what your users need to do. Because it was one thing, I guess, for whoever, like prior to me joining, they set up Tableau and they've done these things, but now we've also reached the limit of what we can do now. So it's kind of then keeping up that pace and being able to scale once you start to, open and create a bit of demand.
Indeed. Okay, so look, we are running out of time. I thought that that we wouldn't have enough to fill 40 minutes, but we could easily run over time. This was a question from the audience, and I think it's kind of where we should end the discussion. A question to each of you, Claire: what does success look like, and how do you measure it?
Oh, well, what does success look like, and how do we measure different things? Success is actually people using data in all their decisions every day, but how do we measure it? I think there are different ways of measuring at each sort of part of your maturity. We are early stages here, and we're getting people to use data. We're also in a culture where people are like, oh, we've promised, consultants have come in and promised like grand sums of doing things with data. So actually we're focused on what are the operational changes that you're going to make by having this data there? And then let's think about the value that comes from that as we do it. And so there's things like, well, actually, we're going to have our forecast 3 days earlier each month. Then it's going to take us 2 days, not 5 days to get there. That's a quite a sort of concrete thing that you can go back and track. When we look to more advanced use cases, it is around actually, our net sales revenue is this for this brand. How do we think we can grow it by improving our sales force effectiveness, or improving the marketing spend? So we're starting with operational metrics before we move to value then. And I think success, the other metrics is how much are people using some of the outputs that we put out there, both data sets, reports, and data solutions. And then also how many people have got involved with some of the training and the communities of practice as well, just to say actually how far across the organisation has this moved.
Thank you. Now, Sue-Lin, I saw that you weren't terribly keen on answering this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What does success look like?
I think I'll just borrow Claire's answer. Most of it is really that. The only thing I would add to that is probably system adoption and data quality within those systems. I think that is a big metric for us and a big part of the business case to push the data strategy project forward, in that they've recognised that the quality of the data and the use, and therefore the usage of the system, has been low. And the reasons that people have stated that adoption is low is because they don't trust the data. So we really are going to put some hard metrics around, measuring the quality of the data within those systems, and then also looking at how, the people using it, how can we optimize those processes and so on. So in addition to those metrics that Claire had spoken about, that's the one that I would add in there.
So Dominic, for you, the last question, what does success look like at MECCA?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm really keen on improving is sort of like, what is the general satisfaction with analytics across the business? And I think we've, in my time and short time and talking, doing a whole bunch of stakeholder interviews and things, I think there's some really serious gripes and complaints, and we can actually, as the providers of analytics for the business, we can really change that. So, the way I look at it is success for me means that we have happier stakeholders, we have analysts out in the business that are able to do their jobs, and we're not being a blocker for people to be able to do the things that they want, is really how I'm looking at it at the moment.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of the session. It's been terrific talking to the three of you. Thank you so much, Sue-Lin, Clare and Dominic. Thank you once again for making yourselves available and sharing those thoughts. It's been a very vigorous and entertaining session, so thank you so much. Really appreciate it.